That was my foundational belief.
Yes.
101 whenever we were preparing in our minds, hearts, energetically to be pregnant, I was like, I am actually going to heal through pregnancy. Pregnancy is a healing state. It is blood flow. It is juicy. It is hormonal. It is all of the big, full, expansive things.
All right, welcome back to the Village Sessions.
Bringing wisdom home.
So we're gonna have a fun topic today. Fun series of topics all related to pregnancy and birth. So I'm pregnant with my third child. I just announced on social media, and it just felt like the perfect time to sit down and have a conversation with you ladies about the energetics of preconception, conception, pregnancy, birth, and just getting to talk story, talk about our experiences, both witnessing the birth space and then having experiences with, you know, maybe what comes from programming versus what can be like a chosen experience is what I like to call it now. But we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about some of our favorite things today before the beginning of the episode. Molly, you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
This was Molly's idea. She's like,
sharing our favorite things. This is something that I love to be inspired by what is lighting other people up. And so I feel like this would be fun to share. We took a trip, my family and I took a trip this summer to Southeast Asia, and I kind of went on like a little gua sha facial tour, like all of the Chinatown places that I could find.
Wow.
We went to. I had 4 different gua sha experiences, but there was one in Singapore specifically that I was blown away by. Wow. And so I got a gua sha tool there. I had been doing the practice before. A friend of mine, Cassandra, had sent me Shelly, I think Shelly Marshall is her name. She's the beauty shaman online, and she has it's called the Skin Within portal, and she has videos showing you all kinds of things like pressure point, gua sha tutorials, face yoga. She's got a lot of videos that are like 15 minutes. So it's like perfect during the day. And then at nighttime, I was doing some of the work, and I do it with my favorite cleanser and moisturizer, the Sea Buckthorn Best Skin Ever by Living Libations. This has been around for a long time, and I've seen Living Libations forever. And there's a facial massage therapist who does facials here on island who recommended this. And so this is like my combo right now. A couple times a night or a couple times a week at night.
I was going to say, girl.
All right,
Molly, she's hardcore about this.
What would that do to your skin? I don't even know. Would you
Get it, sis?
Would it shred?
Experiment
My
with
skin would shred. I'm like, no, it's funny because we learned a lot of scraping though. No, in chiropractic school, you learn a lot of the scraping techniques through some of the PT stuff that you have to do. So I feel like this is very natural, and it's a great way to like, you know, open up the tissues of the face. So a couple times a week at night, I will, while we're breastfeeding or whatever, putting Ko to bed, I just do like our little routine, and watching some of the videos during the day has been really helpful to get me inspired and keep the practice up. So this is what I'm inspired by.
I love that.
Fantastic.
Also found that account through Cassandra. Cassandra's right here. She's our
my friend Cassandra,
who's
who's not in the
right
room.
here. My favorite thing to do from the beauty shaman is the skin rolling.
Yes.
So it's almost like the reverse of gua sha. Gua sha is that you're taking it actually like you're taking the fascia and almost like moving it away from the bone, basically. So she's a great account.
She's really
I was, well, you know, to add to that, I was talking to someone the other day, and this is somebody that back in my myofunctional therapist days, actually did some work with her. Because she has retrognathia and very tight lower, like, lower muscle complex tension, right? So with the retrognathia comes this, overly compensated like chin and jaw angle. And so she was showing me some of the things that she's been doing lately along the same lines, with taking the skin and going back. And I said, what would really be a really good anchor in the front plane would be to take your lips and take your orbicularis and tighten it and push forward so that your jaw will come down forward, and then do those motions. So it's the same.
She does some of this. The beauty shaman.
Oh, she does?
She calls them
Perfect.
face yoga.
Yeah.
She has some of the face yoga, different movements, similar.
But it's the same concept that we talk about that's so useful and helpful in our bodies, where you're actually anchored into one field and moving against and you know, creating that open dynamic that way. But a lot of times we see, you know, like the one-dimensional part of that, where they're just dragging the skin one direction, but you actually have to leave something in the other field to get the benefit of the being able to go both ways, you know?
100%.
So this gal in Singapore, this old woman, she was like, you have to
old
hold.
ladies.
You have to hold.
Yes.
So you're holding.
Yes.
And then you're going. You're
Yes.
always holding and stabilizing.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
a going both ways thing.
And if you think about it like the activation of the orbicularis, which is the circular muscle around the lips, you know, contracting that, leaving it in the front field, and then doing that, that's different, because now you've actually got this ability to do both. And so then, you know, I think so often our bones don't change because of the tissue tension in the fascia and the dysfunction in the muscles, right? So, you know,
Twofold there.
yeah.
I love that we just started talking about face sculpting, and I had an experience with this where I was doing like face sculpting and guasa. Is it guasa or gua sha?
I think it's
Guasa?
traditionally guasa.
Guasa. And I was noticing that to create the tension here to pull back, I was activating a lot of my front chain.
Yes.
And so when I saw that, because I saw myself in the mirror doing it, and I was like, first off, I could feel it.
Yep.
And I could feel the tension in my neck afterwards. So what I started doing is laying in bow with my back of my body engaged. And I have a
Going
video of
up
this.
and back.
Yes. I can link a video in the description box of me doing guasa. Or I was actually just doing like my fingers, like face sculpting, but with my the back of my head engaged
all
into the
this.
ground, and my holding my body in a bow frame. That way I have a direction that I'm sending the fascia while I'm doing the practice. What were you
Doing
gonna
it
say?
on your back, because I was doing it at night. I have been doing it at night while I'm breastfeeding. So either on my back in the bow or on my side,
Love
like
that.
inside bow.
So good.
Intuitively, you're
As-
like, this is
yeah.
what feels best.
Right.
Totally. I
This
haven't-
is the shape.
This
It's
is the
like, you know, back in the day, like if you remember your mothers or grandmothers did needlework, right?
Yes,
So needlepoint, cross stitch, all that, you had to go through this process afterwards of blocking it. So they would wash it and then they would tack it to a board and they would shape it till the shape was just like so. And then they would let it dry, you know, and then
Wow.
it held the shape, right? Sometimes I feel like that's what we're doing, is like blocking our bodies
Wow.
and then just guiding the threads and the fabric.
Yes.
Because, you know, as an we all have art in us, right? One of my mediums is fabric. I love fabric. And, you know, because I used to like smock and French hand sew and all that for my kids, you know, from the very, very beginning. And so I feel like fabric is just like kind of like that medium. But if you talk to me about fabric, I'm like, oh, it's like this, you know, because it just kind of like all goes together for
Makes
me.
sense for you then.
Yeah,
all
it makes
clicks.
sense that way. Yeah.
I love that. What's your favorite thing you want to talk
My
about?
favorite thing lately has been actually these tights, these leggings. The company is, I think it's Ibex, IBEX, like the animal. Is that, did you say it with an I or a short
The
I?
kind of deer?
I don't know.
The type
yeah,
of deer?
yeah,
An ibex
yeah.
deer?
Right. It's a
Never heard of it.
it's a horned animal similar to the axis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they look like what axis deer look like here. But I love that company, and these are wool, and I actually have on a wool like long like shelf bralette, and I have them in every color. I have the gold, the purple, and the blue, and I walk
If you've
in.
been on Bow Spring on Monday and Wednesdays with Amanda,
That's
you know.
I'm repping that.
recognize
That
these.
you'll
Recognize
recognize these
Yes.
because this is like my stuff.
Yes.
It's got the nice wide band and nothing falls out. And I really like that. And yeah, so I walk in the morning. I walk 3 miles. So I live at 4,000 feet. And I walk a mile and a half down and then back up every morning. And yeah, and so it feels really good. So this is what I'm loving right now. I have several things from this company over the last 8 years or so.
I love that you were just like, yeah, just low key walk down and up. It's like
It's
so
elevation,
steep. It's
so
freaking steep.
hardcore.
It
No,
is.
it's so
hardcore.
it's so wild because it's like that's been my thing lately is just like training, like next year, like I just turned 59, I'll be 60 next year. And it's like, you know what? I want to be able to lift a certain amount. I want to be able to like my cardio. I want my we were talking about sleep. And, one of the aspects of sleep is that you have a good cardiac output, like your stroke volume is really good at night. And so I find that, training in that zone 2, doing it HIIT style, high intensity intermittent style, really helps that. So when my heart rate slows at night, I've got a really good stroke volume, so I'm perfusing at night. And I wake up feeling better in the morning. So
Amazing.
it's
the elevation has a piece to play in that.
the elevation is big. It's like it's a rebreather, basically. It's a rebreather trainer, being up here. Not for the weak.
Not at all.
Not at all.
We've literally
no.
had walks up like this isn't even a quarter of a mile.
Right.
Up to the top, the
Right.
very top after dinner. And I'm like
Yeah, and
Chasing my son.
And my latest thing is actually adding sprints to it. So coming up, it's
come
sprinting
train with you in the
some of the hills. Yeah, so that's
Wow.
been my thing.
So great.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite thing, it's a new favorite thing, and it is these handmade
She's
mugs
sharing.
from Kuau Kitty. Cheers from afar. This is Kitty. We've ordered so many things from Kitty. My husband actually surprised me with a whole set of mugs one year for my birthday from Kitty that he designed himself, knowing my style. And then we went to this artisan market yesterday where she always sells these mugs, but you can also purchase from her online. And I like beeline towards her because I see this design. Come
If
on,
you've
guys.
not seen her maker's mark, it's the cutest thing
is.
ever.
It's a-
It's a
kitty.
It's a little cat. And
fun story though about her even coming to Maui. She was like one of the original, and from the time that you're inspired by, the 70s.
Oh, yes.
There's so many threads.
She
Kitty.
was
Kuau
like
Kitty.
this iconic ceramicist in the 70s on
Yeah.
Maui, and one of our really good friends, her mom, I think they were roommates, and they
Yep.
would just like make pottery in the 70s and like surf, and
Such a
Anyways,
vibe.
I'm so inspired by that. So I feel like her essence is really brought forth through her art, and why I love it in my house so much. So this is one of my favorite things.
This is the
Kitty.
reason I
Cheers.
did not go to the market yesterday.
Michelle would have bought
Corey
everything.
and I would have been like in the floor going, ah, are you kidding? No, I'm serious.
Have each other in a headlock.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hiding stuff from
'Cause
each other.
I said,
I would be
Nothing,
like,
nothing.
I would be like, low key, like, could you just hold on?
we have the same exact house style. And,
Taste.
yeah, we went to a market one time where we were like we were watching each other's eyes like catch things at the exact same time, and then she's looking at me.
We
and I'm
found
like,
we found ourselves kind of going,
looking away. So
slipping stuff to
Yes.
the salespeople, going,
I'll take this. I'll take
hold
this.
this for me, please.
100%.
I'll be back.
And it was the same, pretty much the same vendors that were there
Yeah.
last night. So she was like, I'll take one for the team.
I stayed away.
So good.
And I bought this whole set too. I was like, whatever you have, I'll take it.
She did.
I'll take it. All right. So let's get into the topic of conception, pregnancy, and birth. I would love to kick this off with the principle and the concept I know that we all like to talk about a lot, which is the concept of your life is and your life as your prenatal. Because what we have today is, of course, like you got big business, you have the supplement companies. What you have marketed to you today is that your prenatal nutrition comes from either from a pill or it's like what you take as like your, like just in case, you know, like, well, just in case I'm not getting this from this and this, then I'll just make sure that it's like a safety net, right? It's comfort. It's a safety net of being able to get that in. And so we would just kind of want to like zoom that out a little bit and talk about alignment and what it looks like for your life to be your prenatal, to look at your life as basically, you know, we're designed as women to be fertile and to conceive. Your body wants to conceive every single month. That's what our menstrual cycle is. And so looking at what creates, you know, a robust, fertile human and a woman and what alignment looks like in your life to create that as a foundation is something that I always like to talk to women about if they're in a season of, you know, it's called trying to conceive is maybe like a phrase we hear today. And yet, could it be like a natural part of your life, you know, just as natural as, you know, being hungry and eating food, being able to step into a season of conception and step into that consciously. Molly, do you want to share?
Well, the first place that my mind went when you were teeing this up was, I like to use the word in my office, the perinatal season, because you're in and around pregnancy. So within your fertile window, right? So it's kind of like when you start your period until the later years in your life, there's this zone where you're going to menstruate and ovulate, hopefully, if the markers of your metabolics, your circadian rhythm, all of these hormonal pieces are set in place. They set the foundation for your ability to go through a pregnancy feeling nourished. And so, in my office, I always say like in and around the perinatal period, and that's like your fertile window. So prenatal being really like maybe like a microcosm of the perinatal way that you live, the way that you nourish yourself, the way that you're in community, the way that you have foundational elements set up for your health and for your family. And then the second thing that came in whenever you were just saying that is funny. One of the questions when I see clients in my office, one of the questions I ask is, how are you doing with prenatal support? Like, what's your prenatal support look like? That's usually what I ask. And I have a range of answers. So where somebody answers that gives me a window into where
the way that they do things,
or where their mind might be with like, oh, my prenatal care, oh, my prenatal support, I'm getting care through Kaiser, through their insurance. Or they'll say like, oh, I'm taking this prenatal. Or like, so everybody has their little way that they view what is prenatal. What does that mean to me? What does prenatal support mean to me? And I think Yolanda Norris Clark coined the term wild pregnancy in the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And to me, that's a depiction of what you're talking about, the prenatal as your life. Your life is a prenatal. Everything is the perinatal season in the fertile window, because there's any chance you could potentially be pregnant. You know what I mean? Or be bearing a child. And so wild pregnancy is a little bit maybe on the radical end of what a woman's experience would be. And generally in most circles, a wild pregnancy meaning like no ultrasound surveillance, no medical testing, no intervention in the pregnancy in any way, even like Doppler, none of that. Wild pregnancy being like fully an embodied experience of like creating support systems, pulling from the support systems you've already put in place, and then just living, which is like a radical thought for a lot of
Living your
people.
life, yes.
Taking the importance down, but also recognizing the importance of the portal transformation that is birth, right? The portal of humanity, this crazy transition from maiden to motherhood or motherhood and beyond. So those were some of my immediate thoughts with the life is your prenatal is setting up, and this is what you guys do very beautifully, helping people identify how do they create, and then number 2, helping people identify what am I doing to nourish my metabolism, my thyroid, my circadian rhythm, nourish my energetic quality, all of those things.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a nice setup to think about, and we really don't. I think in the modern era, most people don't teach within their families. Like, for example, your daughter, like as she gets older, and she gets toward like having a cycle, and then actually she becomes perinatal at that point, right? And for whatever age that happens, which there's a range of age now, actually later being preferable. Whereas a lot of women my age started their cycles earlier, like 11 years old. Yeah.
And there's a lot of schools of thought, like German New Medicine, for example, 11 is like a very biologic age to begin your period. So I think depending on
your perspective, right? Then in the culture of your family, what is it like to have a perinatal daughter, and then help her build her view of the world according to a fertility lens?
Totally.
Rather than, this is something that might happen, or this is something that we get to control, or something like that.
And I think it's interesting that, and maybe this is in part to like the industrialization, big pharma, medicine, those kind of things. but it's an isolated event now. Pregnancy is
Right. Out of
isolated
context.
and out of context for your living. And so if we're bringing in more of the village lens, people just have babies. you just get pregnant.
Totally.
And then not just get pregnant, you become pregnant
Right.
as a part of your biologic directive. This is the original instructions of the female body, is to bear life and then move on, sustain life, and then bear life again, sustain life, and then nourish their families simultaneously. And so birth has become such a, out of context, isolated event that there are now things and concepts that we place on birth that we don't do in any other category of our life,
100%.
which is a super interesting thought.
Yeah, with the perspective of what is a sign of vitality and being able to look at the picture of the body as a whole, a holistic system, and understanding that ovulation every single month is a sign of vitality in a woman. Being able to conceive each month is a sign of vitality in a woman. Does it always mean that's the perfect alignment for, number one, the soul of the child coming through? Like, there's always a grander design. And yet, because we look at pregnancy as an isolated event, that begins at the process of you move into like, preconception, conception. Okay, that means I take my prenatals and now I think about what would create a healthy pregnancy.
And it's funny because it's almost being termed like conscious conception, as like, this is what I need to do, conscious conception.
Yes.
But it's like, no, like your life.
Yes.
Preparing your life for conceiving.
And perhaps that could already be an integrated part of your life because you're, depending on, what your value system is, if vitality is up there, if living in alignment is up there, then perhaps you're already actually doing or living in a way that is actually your entire state of that prenatal health that you want to achieve. So that's kind of the perspective we're bringing to you guys is, what would that look like to bring in that alignment now? Because that picture of vitality is something you could step into right now. So for you, with conceiving your first son, what did your life look like that, bringing into alignment, up until that point? And how did you spend that first few weeks pregnant and that time of conception?
Yeah, I think the first part that I would love to hit on for the preconception period, and I'm going to say that in air quotes for everyone that's not listening, preconception. The moment I met my husband, or I met the man that would become my husband, and we decided we were going to be intimate in that way and be in a relationship in that way because we were friends for a year before. I was like, okay, these are the things that we need to do to get our life in alignment with how we're going to bring a family in. Though some of the decisions you're making, some of the things we're doing, like we're just not going to be doing this whenever we're conceiving a family or growing a family. And so one of the first things was getting in our creation container with Michelle and the couple, being together as a couple and being united and really working on the union, our communication and our vision for life and the way that we're gonna do things. So that was like number one. And everyone's always like, what did you do in your prenatal time? I was like, honestly, I did relational counseling. I did couples therapy essentially the whole year leading up to Kua's conception. And then, we were talking about this in the pregame. I've helped a lot of women through pregnancy in my office and seen a lot of women immediately postpartum, after their births, also witnessed quite a few births. But something that's striking to me is the decision. Where does this decision making kind of like go wrong for women? That was always a thought for me, because I've witnessed a lot of women come into my office after they've had their babies crying about like, this happened to me, this happened, this is how the birth didn't go the way that I wanted to. And I'm always like, okay, let's track back to like, where was the first decision made that felt like, ooh, there's a little charge there and this may not be exactly what I want, or I'm not sure about this. Like, where was that first decision? And so for us, we didn't make a ton of decisions in the very beginning because we just wanted to like.
I'm sorry.
What are you laughing about?
Just the whole thing.
The whole thing?
Sorry.
Tell me more.
Just, you said you didn't make a lot of decisions. I was like, yeah, that's true.
we honestly just like lived at the same time. Like
Yeah.
we were diving deep into us as a couple and how we wanted to create union.
Yeah.
And we were also like with the pregnancy, we were like, ooh, we're just gonna like keep the seed and like let it be. Let it be for a while. And so I told Michelle at like 7 weeks maybe. 7 weeks. And then
Yeah, it was right. We were at the retreat.
we were at
on
the
the way
retreat.
to the retreat.
That's right. No, we got to the
retreat.
and I sat down and I'm like, well, I'm pregnant. And she was like, oh, she was like, is this a good thing? I was like, yeah, I just am so tired. I literally slept the whole
the freely rooted retreat from 2020
into 2022.
2022.
Yeah.
If
and
any
then
of you guys
2023.
were there,
Yeah.
Molly was like 6 weeks pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah. I was sleeping the whole time. Anyways.
My like inner tutu came out. I mean, I was like, dress me as a warrior right now.
Yeah, protecting me.
You know?
You were her because she was traveling without Sam, and you
Yeah.
were like, I'll be your buddy.
She
like,
taught
Leave her alone.
she taught something afterwards. You taught a postural blueprint method.
Yeah.
And remember, part of I was like supposed to be helping, and
You slept the
I
whole
slept.
time.
She was
Asleep in the back of the room. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I'm so
Thanks,
sorry.
Molly.
Yeah, I was like, I'm doing my best. Yeah, I felt fatigue was like the main, I would say symptom, and I was just sleeping a lot. It felt normal. It felt fine. But we didn't make a lot of decisions regarding like how we were going to do something in the birth until closer to the end. And we really just like what I said, like the wild pregnancy, we dropped a lot of the importance about like the things that we should be doing. And I don't know, it just felt really natural. There was no surveillance technology. There was no testing. No one was touching me. I've never had a cervical check, none of that kind of thing. And I feel like that was one of the most representative of pieces for me of like allowing your body to innately have a process and really just be guided by you and the baby. And then we'll get into more of the like birth story later probably, but yeah, it felt, we were talking about this in the beginning, our pregame brunch that we had, just the idea of the reducing the importance and not having the shock factor and really being like embodied in the experience versus it being some intellectual thing like, oh, I'm pregnant. It's like, no, I let myself have this body, this physical experience. And then I started sharing with people around like 20 weeks is when we kind of like announced it. And it wasn't even like a great big announcement. It was just like, yeah, we're having a baby. And it's the most surprising news that probably anybody's ever going to hear because everybody expected us to have a baby. And it's like, of course they expected me to have a baby because that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to populate the earth and like that kind of thing. So it felt really natural, I would say.
I think that's a real ancient future perspective. I mean, as far as like the tribal views go, I think it's, in fact, we've talked about how very Celtic it is that there's a season for conception.
Oh, yes.
And that the whole year is geared toward the nourishment and promotion of preparing a body to conceive, right? And so that would have been in the tribe from the very beginning, and women would have been cared for with that in mind, and that there was a season to conceive and a season to give birth.
Totally.
It was very clear. Just like, if we had a 13-month calendar, we would have the 28-day cycle, right? So there was also that in the pagan tradition or the Celtic traditions. I'm sure others have them too.
Farming.
Yeah, exactly.
Farming when it comes to like planting crops.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
It's really no different,
Yep.
right? But yet we make it different, and we decontextualize it, and we make it this event that's not associated with a time and space season, right? Which is so interesting to me.
It is. It's a very allopathic lens.
It's a very allopathic lens that this can happen anytime, and
Well, I mean, then you go into IVF. I can do it anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
I can freeze it. I can do it. And it doesn't matter what's happening in your body, what the vital signs are, nothing.
right, yeah, we just make this happen.
we can override the system,
Nature.
override what nature is telling us right now.
Right, totally.
Yeah. So that is one thing that I really did come into awareness of was, this idea of, I didn't ever do like dating or anything like that as far as when my conception time was and when I would be expected. So that is one thing that I was glad that I gifted myself, and maybe I won't do it the same way the next time we have babies. But I wasn't like honed in on this was my conception date. So this is the estimated due date of this baby's arrival. I was just like late summer. We're going to have our baby in late summer. We were preparing for late summer. And I had this idea that there was going to be around 10 moons from when when we conceived. So I counted 10 moons out. I was like, okay, mid to late August. Now I know that that's about like 44 weeks. So I was a little off on that, but we went 41 and 1 that I calculated after the fact. And I honestly actually worked up to, I was in the office working 2 days a week and like 40 people per day schedule.
Wow.
For up until week 40 was my last week in there. And then week 41, I had this really internal, we had a Mother's Way blessing. And then that day I had told Sam, I was like, something's changing in me. I was closing my eyes and I was like seeing colors and I was like having this psychedelic experience. And I look at him and I'm like, this is what's happening inside right now. And he was like, oh, that's not normal for you. This is my everyday. And I was like, good Lord.
Sam, her husband's so ethereal. He's like, I live my life every day like this.
He's like, that's not normal.
I see this all the
I'm
time.
like, good night. And then I was like, shut up. And let me have my moment. And so then that night after the Mother's Day blessing, I had texted everybody in the office. I was like, I'm not coming in this week. Like, cancel everybody. I'm just like done. And then later on, I knew that was my week 41. And then we had our babe, and it was a really innate experience in the fact that I was allowing and listening, and I was listening. I think that was the biggest piece, is like actually internally listening.
Something I really appreciated witnessing your pregnancy after me having 2 pregnancies at that point was the concept of identifying where there might be an opportunity of choice to kind of play into drama stories with yourself, and there being another opportunity, which is neutralizing, having an internal experience. I know you said the phrase keeping the seed earlier, and allowing yourself to almost like self-transform that. Like, what is that? Why do I want to have a drama story? Do I want to be seen by my husband? Do I want more support? Being able to actually take radical responsibility in what the actual underneath desires are. And I just thought you embodied that so beautifully with your pregnancy with Kua, and that's very much inspired, even belief system wise. I really like unpacked a lot of that prior to conceiving this 3rd child. And that has been one of the coolest experiences of going through a full, trimester. It feels like such a data term now, but having the exact same experience of opportunities. And we talked about this in episode maybe 2 or 3 when we talked about Bo, and Bo being this anchor of, can you go 2 directions at the same time? Can there be more than one opportunity, more than one way to do things? And just having the awareness and the capacity comes from nourishment, from resourcing, from radical responsibility, from cleaning up any drains and energy leaks, and being able to see opportunities is, I feel like, a very fresh perspective in pregnancy now.
Yep.
And yet probably this is how women were living for such a long time.
Guaranteed.
But something that you and I talked about early on in my pregnancy was kind of like, if I were to just clean slate it all with like, what is pregnancy? What is the experience of pregnancy, and how much of it is programmed and downloaded to us of like, this is what pregnancy feels like. Therefore, you just automatically just like have the experience with the programming,
Or you expect it.
Yes, you expect it. You anticipate it.
I think that was my experience, was like, I anticipated some nausea. I anticipated some puking or whatever.
Yes.
And I didn't have that experience. And then I would have those micro moments. And
Yes.
like you've explained and you've articulated what my experience was a little better than what I had at the time. But I was like, oh, I actually don't want a drama. I don't want the drama. I'm just going to like keep going.
And being able to recognize, well, one of my friends who's she works in the realm of like neuroplasticity. She calls Google and like the internet. She was like, I would use Google as research on how to do my symptoms better, or like how to do my diagnosis better, because the RAS system is so strong. like our minds are so powerful that we can create neural pathways and belief systems about what experiences are just because we read it on a piece of paper and go, oh, this is what Hashimoto's feels like. Okay, I'm gonna lose my hair now, and then I gotta like do it all.
Map it out.
Map it out. So
bring it into the 3D.
Yes, exactly. And so pregnancy being something that a lot of women experience, you know, it's not something like a more unique experience. It's like a very wide experience is something where the programming goes really deep, and it's something that I've recognized.
So the collective problems become your problems because you went and looked into that and said, oh, I wonder what could possibly go wrong here. Let me tap into that. And then all of a sudden you're nauseous or you're throwing up or you're allergic or you're whatever.
I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, I had Googled I had Googled a chart and it said pregnancy symptoms week by week.
Oh, shut up.
Yeah. And it goes week, you know, it starts with like week 4 or whatever.
Those are the what to expect when you're expecting books.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
100%.
That's that.
And then you have it like, you could just read it one time, but it could be enough of a download where you're like, okay, week 8 is when, you know, maybe nausea would kick in.
So this is the bizarre thing though of knowing and like surveillancing your baby and being like week by week by week. There's no way that the baby's growth is that linear.
So true.
And that hormonal shifts in your body are that linear. There's no way.
So true.
So much of it has to be a thought, emotion, feeling.
Totally.
And then an embodiment of that.
Totally. So one of my coolest experiences is, and I didn't experience a ton. There was one time I had nausea with my son, and I remember I went to my chiropractor and he was like, oh, here's a supplement for, you know, B12. I think my B vitamins were low at the time. Took a supplement, immediately felt better. Second child, more of a foundation at that point of metabolic health. And then I remember there was a brief period of nausea. And then after a chiropractor adjustment dissipated, this time around, I felt what I would classify as nausea a couple times, but they were like energetically, I was clearing something or like rejecting something. And I was like, I think I'm just going to actually, I wasn't even nausea. It was like, I think I just need to go throw up. And I remember doing that twice of like,
get it out.
Yeah. Like my own personal upgrade and transformation. And then almost like a choosing to clear it out that way, if that makes sense. Now
it's very efficient.
Very efficient. It's
self-sourcing.
It's very quick.
It's very efficient.
Very efficient.
Very
and
Virgo.
I was like, oh, interesting. I noticed my choice to, you know, have an experience with that. But secondly, okay, so there were about 3 days, and this was the coolest thing that I remember sharing with you guys with this concept of radical responsibility is there were 3 days that I woke up and felt a little like, just a little off, a little like nausea. It could have been nausea. And I felt myself having the choice of an opportunity. One, having a little drama with it and being like, oh, I don't feel good. I'm going to stay in bed. Kyle, can you take care of the kids? Come feed me. I remember that as like an active choice that I could see playing out like a movie of like, it could go this way. Or I could take self-responsibility here for what my needs are, communicate that cleanly to Kyle, also take responsibility for myself and resource myself. So the first thing I did is that I went outside into the morning sun, sunrise on my eyes, got into a kind of like Bowie movement. I was doing my like morning sun and movement challenge that we can also link because this was the movement that I was doing, like rocking back and forth, getting my ribs open, immediate neutralization of whatever that feeling was as I was telling myself that I'm responsible for my experience here. Right. Like I can choose my outcome here. It felt like a choice. It felt like an opportunity. And that awareness came in just from being able to see that there was another option. There was another opportunity. And in pregnancy, I think I have a theory that this is why, you know, you always hear that we all have this programming where it's like after kid number 3, 4, 5, like the more kids you have, the sicker that you are, the worse that you feel. And there's a
I'm not downloading that. I haven't
had the
downloaded
opposite
that.
experience.
You had the opposite.
So
I
that
take
wasn't
Michelle's
it. It was not. That was not an experience for me. Was that no?
This is a collective
And this
thought.
is
Collective thought.
eight pregnancies.
Yes,
so.
let me differentiate. This is a collective thought that I'm just saying, and it can pass like a floating thought.
Let it go through your mind.
Well, an awareness of that this is a collective thought too is a nice differentiating piece of like, oh, that doesn't have to actually be my thought at all. I feel like I have gotten like literally reversed and brought back vitality through each pregnancy that I've had. And
the body's designed to do that.
And the body's designed to do that.
Yeah,
and pregnancy is a healing state. And what do you
This
know?
is that was my foundational belief.
Yes.
101 whenever we were preparing in our minds, hearts, energetically to be pregnant, I was like, I am actually going to heal through pregnancy. Pregnancy is a healing state. It is blood flow. It is juicy. It is hormonal. It is all of the big, full, expansive things.
And I downloaded that from you 100%. And I was like, yep. And I was actually excited for the idea of like, think about
potential
that. Think about going into pregnancy, believing that it is a healing and beautiful state where you feel awesome and you're upgrading and initiating into a new version of yourself. I mean,
that is one thing in the office, though, I have tracked with all the people that I've seen, hundreds of women that I've seen through the years in pregnancy. There's almost always some type of up-leveling, some type of expansion. How many times do you see women that are in the third trimester, right before they're about to give birth? They're either moving, changing cars, changing jobs, moving across the country, changing houses, up-leveling. Like, I could tell you probably 99% of the time, there's something like that happening in their lives. It's an expansive state.
Super expansive. What were you going
I
to
was
say?
going to say the creative part of that is, like it's all of life, right? So even now that I'm post-menopause, it's like the stereotype for the menopausal woman, same thing happens, right? Is she'll have all these symptoms and these things will happen and your face will do this and your body will do this and all that, right? It's the program and none of that has to happen. Exactly. I had 0 symptoms in menopause. Wow. 0, none. I'm looking at people going, "You flashlight?" I'm like, no, none of it.
Wow.
So it doesn't have to be that way.
Totally.
It's are you going to receive that kind of program? It's the same way was in my births. Same way was, this is what happens, and these are the interventions that go with the different things. And I'm like, absolutely, absolutely not.
And this is why I loved Ray Pete so much, because he has a book called PMS to Menopause, and he was tracking PMS symptoms and being like, it doesn't have to go like this.
No.
Menopause means ceasing of menses. Uneventful. That's what that word means. Go ahead.
Well, imagine if birth was uneventful. Imagine.
Same concept applied.
Same concept applied. And I really do feel like my pregnancy was very uneventful. Birth, I did not take that into the birth process specifically. I'm excited to experiment with that next time. But what would it look like for people to just have a non-dramatic birth? I genuinely have a question and a curiosity about that, because I don't have that in my reticular activating system. I haven't seen this where somebody just has a baby and then they move on and they don't announce it. You know what I mean? Like all of these things, if we just really reduce the importance, but also honor the transformation by the village support. I'm curious.
I think the other edge where that can interestingly be applied is miscarriage. You know, having had
the secondary gain.
Right, the secondary gain from all of the emotion that goes with miscarriage. And I had three miscarriages. And, I can remember tracking my responses through my miscarriages. Wow. And, even though the last one was very, very dramatic. I mean, it was a hospital DNC where I lost a tremendous amount of blood. Wow. And it took me a while to come back for that because I didn't want a transfusion. So, and I was willing to do that, right? But it's interesting, that I tracked like the whole range of possible responses through those 3 miscarriages. But even in miscarriage, we can have the same non-responsive, non-dramatic, very matter-of-fact event.
Wow. I was even thinking, just with the phrase, once again, tracking the opportunities for responses, because even going back to the whole capacity thing. And so with what I was sharing earlier with like it being a download collectively of the more kids you have, the worse you feel with each pregnancy, and it being almost like it going this way. It's like the more your family grows, but that's totally a belief system of, and capacity being so involved there. So what I've loved is, especially witnessing just these case studies of women in my freely rooted space. Let's say a woman is symptomatically moving through hyperemesis. I never know how to say the second word, gravidium. HG is what I call it, like excessive amounts of nausea, vomiting. And so many women would, this is what they would say as far as what was that first step between completely neutralizing and healing that within a matter of days. I've seen 24-hour turnarounds. I've seen a couple weeks metabolically coming online. But first step was always awareness of, I could do things differently. This isn't my death sentence, or what do you call that? Like a I have to do it this way.
Pronouncement, the judgment.
Yes, like it's not permanent.
Yeah.
And so even just the opportunity of hope, awareness of maybe there's more than one way that I could do things, and how is this serving me?
See, that's always where I go with HG is like, oh, autophagy, awesome. You're fasting, cool. And the lack of acceptance of the fact that your body's choosing to fast right now, freaking honor that. You probably, your body's probably not going to go anywhere. You've probably got plenty there to work with. You know, we live in an abundant place. It's not going to, you're not going to disappear.
Totally.
And look at all the stem cells you're creating because your body's taking itself through this very temporary state of starvation. There's actually some benefits there. Can you access that? This may be for you in that way.
And pulling through the thread of your life as a prenatal, your body's nourishment from the 3 months prior is what your baby's pulling from. So all these stores that you've created.
Totally.
But I would definitely, in that situation, you're looking at like, what are you gaining? What is the positive here? How is your life orienting to support this way that you're choosing to have an experience with pregnancy?
And you never know. There may be a total reason that you don't know what you don't know, and it's there to benefit you in some way. Can you receive that and accept it?
100%. Yeah. Can you bring the new awareness in? So that was something else I appreciated in witnessing. I mean, you talk about birth. Are you saying you feel like you didn't bring in the concept of just like a non-dramatic? Because I felt comparative experiences here.
Yep.
I did a lot of drama with my birth with story, and so it was very expansive for me to witness your birth, and Kua comes out, and it's just like the most natural, low key, very chill. I know I've told you this, where I'm like, that was expansive for me because of the even just the differences between how I chose to do drama in Story's birth, and it served me well in that season. And I can see now how
so many learnings from that for you.
Yes, and it doesn't feel like, guys, it doesn't feel like you're doing drama at the time. It's very congruent with who you are at the time, and it does not feel like you have more than one option on how to do things. And so what brought Story through was someone brought back to me an opportunity of, I think you could do it this way. And I was like, oh, okay. And then boom, she was born within 45 minutes, an hour or so.
So close after that.
So soon.
And then you actually got to take that to Molly in her moment and say, can you access this? And then boom, within 30 minutes, Kua was born.
Yeah.
Totally. So one thing I want to emphasize is just, I know we talked about this, and this has kind of been sprinkled into the conversation, but once again, collective thought, what you download, the fact that you kind of gravitate around and become who you surround yourselves with, and the fact that you can take and download stories from what you hear, you can take and download stories from what you hear on this podcast. They're opportunities.
Totally.
Well, you didn't have an anchor for birth in the way that you wanted it. And like, what did you call it? Like beneficial stories or stories where you felt like, oh yeah, I'd have that. I'll take that.
It wasn't in my genetic imprint, my immediate
in your lineage,
the story passing down through my lineage. I didn't have a story to pull from that felt inspiring to me.
And then I said, take mine. Yeah, you can have mine.
I had great birth experiences.
I had great birth experiences. Use them.
Totally. So that was totally part of my birth experience. And I'm sure, God's way of like bringing you guys in to the support piece, but I was going to touch on the drama surrounding my son's birth. I do recognize now as my learnings in accepting support, asking for support, and then also control. And the idea of softening while there's so much potential intensity or chaos happening, but like really softening from a deep surrendered acceptance standpoint. I liked to like, hold it back a little bit. And it's like, okay, cool. Where else am I doing that? And you guys know this. Okay, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to like buffer my drama story. Have you ever had a fetal ejection reflex? Like everybody who's hearing this, I'm just kidding. So next time there's still some like stuff that I'm going to let go of and rewire. And
those of us who've never pushed for a birth.
Yeah,
we do.
Have experience. Yes. So my goal and my idea was like, I just want to be a dog. That's what I kept telling you guys. If anybody's read the Husband Coach Childbirth,
because that was one of the things I was talking to you about before. Is that was what I read, having come from the tertiary care center where I was trained. I was like, oh, there's no way in AT double hockey sticks I'm doing that.
No way in tarnation.
I'm not doing that. Then I'm gonna choose something different.
Else.
And then I read Bradley Method, and it was called Husband Coach Childbirth at the same time. So I didn't have a husband coach childbirth, but I did a very zen, very late,
very calm,
a very calm, animalistic like labor scenario.
I still remember this. We're naked at the beach and we're laying there, and I was
a visual for all you guys.
I was getting full on heliotherapy in pregnancy a lot, and we were chatting about this specifically. It wasn't the same time you offered me your birth stories, but we were talking through laboring strategies.
Right.
And there's a host of things you can choose from. But something that you offered me was like, hey, there's this idea of like the animal just like letting the sensations ride, and they lay there and the body is soft and they pant and they breathe, but then the sensations go through them and then the babies arrive. And I was like, I want to be like that. And then whenever I was in labor, the only thing I could pull was that I want to be a dog. I'm a dog. I was like, just let me be a dog. God, just let me be a dog. Thank you so much, body. Thank you, baby. Let me be a dog. And I kept going back to that. So I think the drama piece was like not allowing myself, just holding on a little bit, holding on, keeping control. What if I would have let go of everything? What if I would have been uncontrollable? Like, I don't know what that would have looked like, but I think that was part of my unwinding, unraveling drama story.
Well, I think part of that was also like when we walked in that day, you were at that point where you were like, there was a frame like to be held for you, and I think part of that was like, Kori took this photo when I went in and sat, you were like laying across the end of the bed. I sat beside you and I just started stroking your hair and I said, so
how we doing?
How you doing? How's this going to go?
She asked you came in with the prompt of, how do you want to do this?
How do you want to do this?
It gave opportunity for maybe there's more than one way.
And that's, and I think, and I knew your answer. You were going to do it the way that you do it, which is the difference between the how and the way. And yet that was my way of giving you control back. It's like, how do you want to do this? We're here to support you. Let's do it. You tell us how this is going to go down. Yeah. And then things shifted.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the up-leveling of the support. How do you want to be supported? Can you verbalize how you want to be supported? Can you cleanly communicate it? Do you know what you need? Do you know what you want? And getting in those moments, like, of course, there's so much happening in labor. Your body, you're out of the conscious thought and awareness is not as intact as it normally is for good reason. And still at the same time, I had clarity and I was like, yes, I want to get up. I want to like move this baby through me. I want to bow this baby out. I want to meet my baby and I'm ready and I'm willing. And I'm going to go oscillate down this emotional ladder. And I'm going to go to, I can't do this. And then I'm going to be like,
ride the ladder back up.
Yes, I'm doing it. This baby's coming. Not knowing where I am, no medical support. Like there's a lot of things that I had to still in that moment untangle myself from, being like, oh, should I call a midwife? Like, let's call a midwife. And she's listening to me and she's saying, you're having your baby. I'm like, well, I already know that, but like, what else you know what I mean? So pulling myself away from the normal conditioning of like having a cervical check, saying you're 9 centimeters dilated. Oh, the baby's head's almost there. Like none of that was happening for us. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful at the same time that it wasn't.
And a huge part of your birth was you pulled through things in your life, everything in your life that you had already been implementing, already been integrating up until that point. Already been integrating up until that point. We laugh now about, I say I did drama with Story's birth, but up until her birth, I was like, this is going to be huge. This is going to be big. Like I had this belief system.
I do remember that.
Yeah. I had a belief system of like, this is going to be my victorious, like my redemptive moment. Therefore, I believed it unconsciously, I probably believed it needed to be just as dramatic as the C-section, right? You know what I'm saying? The resolution.
There was also a moment where you were like, is she too big?
Oh, yeah.
That too. Yeah. So it was almost like grand in every sense.
100%.
Everything's going to be grand and big. And of course it is. It's the most transformational thing you're ever going to experience. And at the same time, it's what women do every day.
Totally. And she was 100%.
Sorry.
It really is. It's like, and I think I had that thought, like, I remember that in labor was just a thought of like, women, how does everybody do this?
Totally.
And I'm like, of course, everybody does this. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it.
It's funny too. There was a lot of like feedback loops of, like I remember my midwife being like, this is the biggest placenta I've ever seen. She's the biggest H-back I've ever seen. She's the longest baby I've ever seen. So like so much of my, even my, of the big, it's, I'm going to go big. And then it all ended up right there in the outcome. That's so interesting. Getting to see, just to see the whole experience as a whole. And so are you laughing?
It just makes me laugh. I laugh, when I hear birth stories because I was 100% that in birth, because I can remember like intentionally like setting up scenarios where like doctor's not coming. Or, like I had 2 hospital births and then I did a home birth and then I did a birth at midwife and then we broke into a hospital to have the last one. And then I had a miscarriage between 4 and 5 and then 7 and 8 were miscarriages. And I can remember just being so like in control in my births,
You have that psychic quality and ability to orient your internal intention with the outer intention and organize.
Yeah.
And I think that's a gift, something you've cultivated.
I don't know if it's that or if it's just innate. I know with the second one, like I'd been laboring all day and it was a Friday and the doctor's like, oh, every weekend he would take his wife and go out of town. And I knew this. And he's like, well, Dr. So-and-so is here and they'll take her. I'm like, she steps in this room. I'm going to the parking lot to have this baby. And he knew I was not kidding. Right. And he was like, oh God, and because I would have easily just picked up and walked out. I mean, I don't care. And because I do care, actually, that's why I would go to the parking lot and have that baby. And probably 20 minutes later, he went and did something else. And then the nurse and I, just did it, And, but it's things like that where I don't know. I never really related to women who didn't have that capacity, like to literally like move their whole world around them during a birth. And it
direct.
Yes. Even though she's the one giving birth, I was always directing, right, when I was giving birth. And I don't know what that is, but
also out of necessity.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Out of necessity at the same time.
Yeah. It was almost like I might as well have been by myself. Yeah. And so I just naturally did that, the same way, third born at home and fourth born, the midwife actually cracked her sternum trying to catch a goat the week before he was born, like the week he was due. And it's like my body just kind of waited, until she was fully incapacitated. And then seriously.
Because you went over your whatever.
Seriously,
your
whatever.
range.
And then in labor, go to her place, she's literally cannot move. She'd been adjusted by a chiropractor that morning, and I think her sternum was actually broken. And then I'm like, oh, we'll call so and so. She drives in from another state, and then they fought over like breaking membranes or whatever, rupturing membranes, and if it had been done one way, potentially this could have happened. But because we did it this way, another outcome happened. And I just felt like that kind of been my whole thing, like all of my births.
The way you create.
Yeah, that's the way I create, is like that way.
How, in your own birth story,
Born feet first.
Yeah. Doing it, just
Footling breach.
just jumping in.
Totally been laying down on my feet ever since.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of it.
I wonder, there's a midwife out of Australia, I'm blanking on her name right now, but she brings in very spiritual concepts into birth and labor. And one thing she has said that has stuck with me was the way that you create anything, oftentimes you can correlate that to how you were brought into the world. And so something that I like to map over to the things that we create and the things that I create, and even with Kua's birth, was I was my mom's only natural birth. She took a little, what do you call it, castor oil, because she was kind of ready. Everybody was ready and waiting, and that was natural for her and the time and the place, that the community that we were living in. And she just went to the hospital and had me, and it was perfect. And then every other birth, there was a little bit more drama, a little medication, little yada yada. And so I was like, that is how I do things.
Wow.
Just naturally. You just do it. You're ready for it. You wait for the timing, and then you say, yep, we're going to do this. And then I think it was like a 3-hour labor.
Yeah.
And she was just like, yeah, here we go. Third born. But so I feel like you can map over some of that if it feels congruent. The story that the midwife was giving was how in her own labor, her mother having her, there was a really tough period for them in their labor where they had to do a transition to the hospital, yada, yada. And so she's like, when I'm about 3/4 of the way through any creation process, I get heady, I get scared, I get fearful. I do this thing where I'm going to maybe I'm going to drop out. And then she's like, now I recognize it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just going to finish this out. I'm just going to keep going because that was the imprint that she was given. So I don't know if that supports any of your stories and maybe even with your children, but something to consider if it comes up for you.
Totally. Well, let's talk more about the creational aspect of it, because something we really enjoyed exploring as a village is the concept of who you bring in for support in the birth process. And we talked about this so I want to talk about your choice of, obviously, the village. That was the village birth. That was that was the village birth that felt like it was seated in that moment, is the experience of bringing in support with those who you're in relationship with. And so we've gotten to have all these experiences with this concept since then. And as an example, we talked about this in the realm of photography, but I don't know if you guys listening have ever had a friend who knows you really well, and you've asked them to take photos of you, maybe family photos or a photo of you, and the outcome of those photos looking so differently than if you hired somebody that you hadn't met, and then you guys meet, right in the shoot. And we were just kind of unpacking experiences with that concept of I have a friend who, she used to live on the island, but Kyle was actually just talking about this the other day. He was like, we, the way that she knew our family, and then anytime that she got behind a camera and shot our family, the experience of seeing the photo back and being like, that is exactly us. That is exactly us captured in a photo, would feel so differently than maybe, has anybody had an experience with seeing a photo of you and being like, wait, what? That doesn't look like me.
All the time.
Yeah.
Michelle's like,
do you want to share your
pre-game breakdown?
Do you want to share your example with that, with photography?
Oh my gosh, most of my experiences, I think, with photography, just feel that way. It's like, it doesn't even feel like me. It doesn't even look like me. I mean, I had my breakdown this morning. I was like, I don't like any of the angles. I don't like anything I've seen so far. It all looks, doesn't look like me, doesn't feel like me. I don't like it. Yeah. That's pretty much how it went down. The pregame.
It did go
That's
down
how it went
that.
down. And so, then we have to get Cassandra in, and she's like calming everything down, and
Our creative director.
bring everything back in,
Yes.
And I'm like, after post committing to like losing 30 pounds, and you guys are like, whoa,
Well,
stop,
don't do
back
that.
up.
So yeah, it's for me, it's super challenging. There are so few photographs that I actually feel like look like me.
And the thread that we pulled through the last time we were chatting about this in the last year or so
Was that after I had the photos taken and I had the breakdown after that? Yeah,
Yes.
that would be the one.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was this summer.
Yep.
It was recent.
After I got back from Europe.
Yeah. And the concept or just this curiosity being, had you have been in relationship with whoever was behind the lens,
Would it have been different?
would it have been different?
Could be.
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
But I feel like this is something that we've experienced with, creating the podcast, creating other things in our lives, right? We all have this experience. For me, it was birthing my son. The woman that we had chatted about, she was like she's an elder, birth elder on island that doesn't do any professional work anymore, but she was going to come in and just support Sam really, and however he needed to be supported. And the day that my water broke, Sam and I were laying in bed, and I was watching my stomach. I sent a picture to a friend. I was watching my stomach like contracting. I was like, whoa, this is insane. So I was like snapping pictures of it. And then I get a text from the auntie that was going to be with us. And she's like, hey, I'm not feeling great. So if birth happens in the next little bit, like, I don't think I'll be able to be there. I wouldn't feel like my support would be beneficial to the collective.
Part of that orchestration.
Gosh, it was so crazy. And so I stood up, walked to the kitchen, water breaks. I'm like, cool. Yeah. Auntie's not going to be here. We're going to do this on our own. And then sure enough, we were like 17, 18 hours in. And then Sam was like, I think we need some fresh energy. So he calls
for coffee.
He calls Michelle and Kori for coffee. But this was part of our experience of like, oh, great. What a great opportunity to bring in people that we are in relationship with, that know us, that know me, that hold the same frame as me, have the same energetic capacity, or even you guys have an expanded energetic capacity. And that's really what I wanted to be surrounded by. And I wanted my son to be imprinted with. And so how do you create anything? Who are the people that you call in? Similar with the podcast story.
Yeah.
And feeling really good with, like, who's our team? Who's behind the camera? Who's going to be the one making some of these like technical decisions? And are they in alignment with our artistic view and our energetic state and the transmission of what we want to come through the microphones? Does that all feel calibrated? Those are big questions.
And then organically, so we had a production team, and then organically there was a shift that needed to happen, and they were moving, and then we had this opportunity to bring in people we're in relationship with to be our podcast production team, and just
hey guys.
Hi Benny and Cassandra, and Kyle's with their boys, and it's very like it's very villagey. Village is the word. So I'm like, oh, that's hilarious that we got to get into alignment with ourselves with the exact concept that we bring into
all the needs got met.
All the needs got met. And this concept that's been seeded since that birth experience, since we've had an experience with village, and then getting to experience that over and over again and look at, what that looks like because the experience was that rich. And so, yeah, with this pregnancy, I just love, it's almost like taking the same concept. If you ever had a consult and somebody wanted to go get a frenectomy and they're like, I got to do this. And you're like, there's no rush.
Yeah.
Why would there be a rush? Why would there be a rush? You could just slow down. And I really felt that in this pregnancy, similar to what you were sharing with you and Sam in the beginning of your pregnancy with Kua, just the idea of like living your life. And I just know that if that's going to be a midwife that I bring in the future, like whatever that's going to look like, it's going to like organically unfold as I'm clear on myself, the values that I hold. And right now I'm content. And I feel the seasonal alignment in that way of yeah, it's an interesting thing to reflect back on, of choosing a midwife so early, of like, okay, who's available? This person being like, okay, and then making that decision, sealing the deal, and then going the rest of your pregnancy. No good, bad, right, wrong. with that. And yet what feels right for me now is just being in resonance with myself and my family, and then looking at what's available around me when that time comes. That's what feels resonant for me now with this concept of a village.
It's funny, something you talk a lot about in the midline revolution community. I've heard you say this a handful of times, is encouraging mothers to be aware of where their helpers are in their field. And so slowing down is a huge part of that. Slowing down and being aware and being conscious of who the people are in your field, in your immediate community, in your life, the people that are in alignment with you, in resonance with you, that want to help you, and maybe they're trying to help you, and you could be potentially blocking it because you have an idea and an expectation of how things are going to go. But being aware of that, being attuned to who is, or even, the things around you. I love the herbal idea of like going outside, walking outside in your yard and learning about the plants. And like one of the plants that grows naturally wild in your yard is like something you need for bone healing or something. Like those kinds of concepts I think are really rich ways to identify where the village support is and could be. Something that we also experienced in labor. We did have a midwife come at the end of my labor. After Cool was there, it was like within probably an hour or so after, and just to help some of the bleeding subside and those kind of things. Some of my questions that I had, supportive questions that I had immediately postpartum. And the thing about that was I didn't hire her. I didn't preconceive this like contract with her. I didn't pay her for that in that way. And at the same time, we had seen each other 5 times in the 3 weeks leading up to our birth. Like you met her at EO one. That was 2 days.
Yep.
That was 3 days before I went to labor.
Right.
You had actually had a meeting with her for the first time.
Wow.
While we were going to the river, she was going to like that many times. I'm walking into Mana like, hey, and she's like pulling in the parking lot. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're so close. And like, I know you don't need me, but call me if you need anything. Like, that's what she always said. She's like, you've got this. You don't need me, but like, I'm here to support you.
Right.
So funny, just like the helpers in your field.
Totally.
They're there.
That was very clear for you.
It was very clear for me. I was like, I know who I'm going to call.
Yes.
Like clearly God was like, he's planting it. So you're just paying attention.
Yeah, and that's part of the belief system too. If you can hold that, is that everything you need is provided for you and it is present for you. It's just, are you clouded because some other program has told you that this is what it should look like, or this is how it should be, and this is the qualifications it must have, and all of this other stuff. But a lot of times that's just not true.
I think this is part of the allopathic lens, but I think collectively the current state of maybe even just like the holistic community of women, they get clouded by the decision making in birth and labor support. And there's so many things that there's all these shoulds and these requirements of midwives, when midwives, they're just humans. They're just people. And they're just humans, and they all do the best that they can. But we have all of these expectations, requirements. So it doesn't actually leave a lot of room for the creation of birth in the way that it could potentially happen. We have all of these already, and I'm guilty of this too, preconceived notions of like, well, she's a midwife that does this, or like she's this kind of person, or like, oh, for this baby, she did this. Like, I'm totally guilty of putting these caps on the potential for a creation or relationship and creation. So
well, that goes back to your concept you were sharing in the very beginning, full circle, because that's something I got to sit with after my birth experience with my daughter is, the kind of the experience of like, you look at your birth as a whole and then you go, okay, how, once again, radical responsibility. I was still curious, even if it wasn't something I was like fully ready to step into. 100%, I still have my curiosities of how might I have chosen this outcome, and how did this serve me? Even though I had a successful HBAC, it was beautiful. It was also, so just looking at different dynamics that were maybe happening during the birth experience, or feelings. That's what it is. Getting to sit with my feelings about things. Okay, what does that feeling mean? How is that serving me? How does it remind me of something that's being brought to my attention? And then it kind of goes back to your full circle moment of witnessing so many people coming through your practice and being like, okay, at what point do things go wrong, in the sense of like, if there's an adverse outcome or any outcome, at what point does the self-responsibility come in to being clear on what we choose? And did you feel like you got clear on that as far as for you?
For me, it came back to the learnings in support and like really being clear. And I think there was a visual piece that I had, like the actual emergence of my son was exactly what I imagined. The daytime was different. I thought it was going to be dawn. It was 2:30 p.m. But it was literally exactly like I described it at one. Okay. So the only time I had a fetoscope and I was listening to his heartbeat was at a village prenatal in North Carolina at the Matriarch Rising Festival that Emily Saldea puts on. And in that village prenatal, we had to give our vision of our birth. And up until that point, I was so resistant because I was like, I'm just open, I'm open to it. And then it was Sister Morningstar. She's like, no, I need to hear your vision for your birth.
Wow.
And I was like crying.
Dial it in. Yeah.
This is what I envision. And everyone's like, why is she crying? But I was just so emotional at that point. I was like 36 weeks.
Because your creation shapes you.
Yes.
Yes.
And so that's the reciprocal part of the creation process, is that you're creating and your creation is also creating you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like some of the dynamic I've gone through in the podcast creation, is that at my age and stage of life, I'm very clear on how I create. I'm very clear on timing and things like that. And I manage all of that really well, just like I did my births, mm-hmm. right? I'm very in control. I'm very in controlling. I mean, okay, maybe, but I'm very in control. It's like now this, now that, this, da, 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 da. It's all very precise and very orchestrated, right? And yet when you collaborate and create relationally, that is also creating you in a different way. Because I remember at one point I was like, F it, And then my son, my third born, actually sat me down and was like, would you be willing to hear me out on this? And I'm
I love that question for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you have for me? And he's like, I really think you just need to see this all the way through and let it have its final like birth piece. Okay. He said, because this is for you somehow, and somehow it's about you and it's not, and all the things at all the same time. He said, and I know you typically don't, like work with groups. You're very independent. Mm-hmm. He's like, but there's something here for you. So I think you just need to like stick it out and either churn it or burn it or whatever, or it's going to be like the most phenomenal thing for you. And I'm like, okay, I roll.
Yeah. He's giving you your medicine.
Yeah.
And then you listened.
And I listened. And so I'm like, okay, let me see where I can get with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good.
But it's the thing that you're birthing is also birthing you. So it's a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah. And I think the way that you talk about, the control, the calculation, the orchestration, for me, it's like this envisioning or this visual. And the immediate postpartum, I did not visualize. I didn't visualize.
Really good point. Because this is where you and I sometimes get involved with a family is 100%. Is in the, the birth went the way that it was going to go. A lot of times very much the way that you thought, or you got the thing that you hoped for, and then you're in the...
Or it was the thing that was in the like, it's like the shadow piece of it, right? If it's an adverse outcome, it's like the thing that you didn't want. Well, okay, you were focusing on that.
Right.
The resistance, the thing you created resistance between.
And then you get to like the breastfeeding part. And like I say, breastfeeding is a vital sign. So another sign of vitality in the post birth, in the postnatal period, and how that's going is a lot like the dyadic process that we've been through here, creating and bringing that through is, are we going to be able to dance? Are we going to be able to like pull this off? Because right now I just want to step on everybody's toes and walk out of the room. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine sometimes like the babies are feeling that way too. They're like, I just want to bite you and leave, but the baby's like,
but I'm also hungry.
But I'm also hungry. So,
we're going to keep
basically
trying.
bleep you,
Yeah, totally.
And so, and we get involved in that space where there's still like the working out of the creation process. It's not done, right after the birth.
Totally. Yeah, we get to have our own very quick little rebirth, We had 2 episodes out, recorded 2 more, decided not to post those, and then brought in a whole new production
We
team.
posted one, we took it down.
Yes.
That was an interesting experience.
Yes. For the reason of sitting with it and going, I want the opportunities. We were like, I see it this way, and I want something else artistically, and the feeling, like the feeling in the art is kind of our like north compass in a way. And any final thoughts on radical responsibility in conception, pregnancy, birth, how you create awareness of opportunities? Any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that run through my mind, but the first is that no one births your baby except for you. No one's going to birth your baby.
Love that.
But you. And I implemented, downloaded, brought that into my awareness and Sam's awareness very quickly early on. And me relying on someone else is a form of outsourcing. So how can I insource as much as I can and then allow the process to bring in support? Not outsourcing, but bring support in close to me. And then the other thing is, it's something that you talk about a lot with slowing things down, and it's not emergencies. I think there's, I'm blanking on the woman's name right now who coined this, but birth is emergence, not emergency. And I feel like the allopathic realm has just totally twisted that for women and stripped us away from this spiritual experience, from the physiologic transformation that happens, from the rite of passage that happens. And so that would just be what I offer women in all of creation, is slowing down, looking for the helpers around you, recognizing that it's not an emergency. It's literally the emergence of you and a new life.
The emergent process, or being emergent in a process, is that co-creative, dyadic, intersubjective experience. Because it's, like I said, the thing that you're birthing is birthing you. And, there's multiple levels and layers of what's happening that are so vital that we can't take it all in. And a lot of times what happens is, in the replay, we actually begin to understand the magnitude of what happened. And all of that telling and retelling and experiencing is all very, very much important. And I think to be respectful of self and other, that in a process, we're all having our process, right, is so big. It's so huge. Like I said, when I walked into you and you were like, I'm done. And I'm like, we're just beginning, sweetheart. Let's begin. How would you like to begin? And then walk with you as you make one choice and another, and support you in all the things I know that your body needs support with, as you begin to put one foot in another and walk yourself to your birth, right? And so my process is not to get in your way and be supportive. Your process is to step up into that control and then also listen to your baby. So there's so much going on at one time that if you go fast or you try to go fast, that someone may miss their process, And so we see this in the therapy and development space a lot too, where it's like, if you slow down with the conversation, even someone else is running their mental process and coming to a new space and place with their understanding on some kind of level. And if you just steamroll over it,
some of the learning may not
you're gonna miss it, or you're gonna miss the experience of it, And what do I say all the time? We're here for the experiences. How can we be more embodied and present for the experience?
And I love that you're bringing up just the experiential and the embodiment piece, because I do recognize, even after creating Navigating the Curves, which is the birth course that we all created together post my son's birth, with the framework of Bowspring at the center, we see, I have chatted with a few women that have, one, taken the course, a few women that have not taken the course, that are interested in the course but haven't made the investment. And there's a key component of intellectualizing the information about bowspring.
Yes.
I know the things about bow. I actually know the
all
algorithm.
the time.
100%.
What has been your embodied felt experience with that? Those are two completely different things.
100%.
And you saying that you went through, like for example, I went through Yolanda's portal course during pregnancy. I embodied a lot of the principles that she places in there. And I also did a lot of bowspring. I did this whole physiologic embodied experience throughout my pregnancy. And at the same time, it was like totally normal living life.
Totally.
So it wasn't here. It wasn't like, yes, I have. And this is my husband and I talked a lot about this in preparation for what we would consider it like being a free birth. Later on, we called it the village birth. But the preparation for free birthing was honestly more unlearning and undoing than it was like putting information into my brain and holding it and retaining it. There was a moment early on. Oh my gosh, I forgot about this part. But I was watching one of the Free Birth Society's videos and I was like, this is my week moment. This was like a 2-week period. But it was me being like, okay, babe, so no one's going to be there. So if the head comes out, what are you going to do? I would quiz him. I was testing him and he would say something and I'd be like, wrong, not what you're going to do. So this was my process with being like, oh yeah, my husband's not my midwife.
A buzzer.
I had a buzzer.
Put the electric collar on.
My other friend Kori was there listening to us and she was just like, what's happening? So that was my low moment in preparation.
But this is actually a really good point because what we don't really correlate with creation is destruction, and they are equal.
Totally.
And a lot of people,
Both ends of the pole.
yes,
The polarity
they exist together.
They have to be together.
They don't exist separately.
Totally.
And the destruction that is present is the exchange. It's part of the trade. It's part of the process. So if there's unlearning or you completely like abandon a former way of life or belief systems or whatever, fill in the blank, that's also part of the beauty of the creative process is the destruction. So if you can hold destruction in high regard, you have really gotten, so you said something about radical responsibility and I'm like, responsibility in creation, responsibility and respect in destruction as well.
We've talked about this with actually one of my drives. It was the reason I was listening to the J. Cole song, whenever we put on our stories.
Are we doing this again?
No.
Sing it, please.
But we were like voting on what song we were listening to on our hype. And you guys voted on our stories, like guessing who was who. And mine was No Role Models by J. Cole, which was such a random song. I think it's been 10 years since I've heard it. And I don't know if it's been out for 10 years. I don't know, guys. It's been a year since I've heard it. So I was inspired by it because what I was pondering on was the facing of life and death in birth. And what I was talking with you guys about in the pregame for the podcast is like, we have to reckon with our own. This is what women have been doing for thousands of years before people came in to save, is the facing of one's own death, the life and death, reckon with
initiation.
The initiation of like, could I die? Could my baby die? Like just like the
absolutely
the full facing of that, and then looking at the ways in which case women choose to bring something in to save them from that facing, from that experience.
Right.
And we all know the full spectrum of what that could be. Go ahead.
And I think this is funny because it can be disguised in the holistic world with you having a midwife or a doula or something.
Totally.
There's a disguise there. There's I don't actually have to take full responsibility for what if I do die because somebody else is going to be there to save me.
100%.
And Sam and I got very clear on that. I said, so there's a potential possibility since we're not having any medical care, medical providers, I may die. My baby may die. And that sounds so intense. But those were real conversations that we had. I was like, how do I want to die? I was like, okay, this is actually, I'd rather die at home. Like, to be honest, like I would rather die in a place where I feel like I'm held. I'm held and I'm in congruency with like my belief systems about the world and my people. And I want to be surrounded by the same way I want to birth is the way I want to die, at the same. So holding responsibility, respect for those ends of the spectrum, I think is a very real conversation. And one that takes a lot of like, there's a human development piece that goes along with that, and a maturation piece, I think, that goes along with that.
Totally. Yeah. And be honest about your discomfort in just listening to this conversation, if that's coming up for you. But I love the polarity piece of the destruction and the
Creation and destruction
in the life and death piece that is birth. It's a life cycle. And so I love that you talked about the development piece and also just the capacity piece as a full circle, because my answer to that question as far as, radical responsibility, I just love in witnessing your birth, the pulling through of the resourcing piece of like, we knew exactly how you needed to be resourced. We knew exactly how you resource yourself. And so some of these pieces before Michelle would like ask you a question of how you want to do things was like, let's get her an adrenal cocktail. Let's get some food in her mouth. And it was like salt, sodium, just magnesium. Like it was
papaya from the tree
outside. Like
right.
it was, we were watching you come online, both from the resourcing piece and like you just like could see the light coming back in your eyes. And so I think that being a huge piece of what you pull through, once again, getting your metabolism online, your life as your prenatal. What does that look like to bring in the resourcing? Notice where you are outsourcing. Notice where you are outsourcing in an unconscious way based on getting those needs met through symptoms or fatigue or drama stories. And then being able to put the two together, the resourcing and the self-responsibility. I see them as like literally not
Inseparable.
separate, 100%, like them going together. So we share more about that in Navigating the Curves. That is it integrates bow, self-responsibility, and then in going full circle to what you were sharing about cerebral, two of my favorite shares about Navigating the Curves were actually like very reflective of each other. Two women had taken it at like, they were due, they had their baby within a week or two of going through the course. And so it was fire hose, cerebral understanding. They had their birth outcome, and then they actually went through the course a second time postpartum to look at their birth experience and use the course as kind of like an anchor of a framework to like examine how things have unfolded. And it was the aha moments of, oh, this was a cerebral experience for me the first time because of the rush. It was like, yeah. And there's never anytime is a good time to go to begin, but notice if it's through a fire hose or choosing simple things to integrate in the now. So that's kind of where I'd leave it. We'll link the course, the link for the course in the description box. And
is there anything else you want to share about this pregnancy and birth and what you're excited about?
Oh my goodness. I'm excited about so many things. I just have loved the experience of the vitalization. I feel amazing. The expansiveness. I've never felt so creatively expansive in my life. I'm almost bewildered at how much capacity creatively I have and how organized. I'm so organized. And the capacity to expand with your expansion is a direct reflection of the resourcing, the capability that you believe that you have. It could go this way or it could go this way. Like the choice is yours. And so being able to experience this again in such an integrated way. And it's just been a beautiful process. I've been incredibly grateful for this process, and I'm excited to create more content about pregnancy and how the process has been. So I'll leave it there.
So beautiful. Thank you guys. Thanks for letting me share.
Of course. We'll see you guys in the next episode.